About who this group, with the backing, as we understand it, of the Chinese government targeted. The staff members of the current Senate Majority Leader, the staff of the current Vice President of the United States, the current President-elect of the United States, the Vice President-elect of the United States. And to the extent we know, they were successful, perhaps, in garnering at least some of the communications of these individuals and their staffs. And this is truly extraordinary. And I hope it is a wake-up call for our entire government, our entire country, that we face with China a peer competitor of a kind that we frankly haven't seen in any of our lifetimes. And I hope it's also a wake-up call for these American corporations that for too long have been willing to sell out American jobs and America's security interests in order to make a quick buck, and in so doing have threatened all of us. If there's ever an advertisement for bringing our critical supply chains home, if there's ever an advertisement for bringing back core American manufacturing, if there's ever an advertisement for safeguarding American jobs in every sector, particularly these critical sectors that have to do with telecom and communications, this is it. This is it. The time is upon us now to make sure that we safeguard these critical industries and that we put an end to Chinese influence and espionage, which is trying to spread itself into every sector worldwide and right here in the United States. That's why this hearing is so timely. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again to all of you for being here. Mr. Meyers.
Hey, everyone. Today I'm diving into a story that's sending shockwaves across America, the Salt Typhoon cyber hack. This isn't just another data breach, it's a massive wake-up call for the US government, corporate leaders, and all of us. Hackers, allegedly backed by the Chinese Communist Party, infiltrated systems tied to the Senate Majority Leader, the Vice President, and even critical tech infrastructures. The implications? They go beyond stolen emails. It's about our national security, economy, and future global standing. This wasn't your average phishing scam. The attack was a highly sophisticated infiltration targeting communication systems of key US leaders. According to cybersecurity experts, the goal was clear: gather sensitive political and strategic information that could be exploited later.
Collect large amounts of information that they could later exploit, whether that be political information, military information, or intellectual property. We've seen the Chinese over the past decade significantly up-level what they were doing. In the testimony, I refer to smash and grab operations, where they would break into one target, steal the thing that they want, and then leave. They are now maintaining persistent and enduring access to those targets in order to continuously collect large amounts of information and exploit downstream relationships to other interesting targets.
Exploit downstream relationships. Give me an example.
Sure. So with a lot of the telcos or ISPs that might be targeted, they have customer trust relationships, right? In other words, other organizations rely on those critical infrastructures for services or even shared services or web hosting, things of that nature. And they can exploit that trust relationship to then take on the persona of the initially targeted organization to exploit that trust relationship and use that to move to other areas.
So could the hackers impersonate particular individuals?
They could, yes.
Could they disrupt specific communications between particular people?
I'd say it's fair to say once they gain access to the telco, or to the mobile provider, they could initiate or disrupt communications, and it's at the core of the system, right? So they'd be able to basically do anything that the telco could do.
You mentioned their intention being to exploit this information. What are some possible examples of that exploitation? What could we be looking at?
In the case of many of these Chinese adversaries, espionage would be the number one objective or motive in order to collect information. But as I mentioned with Vanguard Panda, and this has been covered pretty extensively elsewhere, there is a concern about pre-positioning. So if there was to be, for example, an escalation around Taiwan, could they use that access to disrupt logistics or disrupt military operations or critical infrastructure in the region that would potentially slow or disrupt the U.S. response?
Got it. Just on that point, does the use of a foreign network hardware in this country, like for instance Huawei, does that make these vulnerabilities worse? Is that something we should be particularly concerned about? What's the effect of that? How does that play into this?
Well, I think with a lot of that foreign technology, there's really no way to assess what's in there. In other words, there is a hardware supply chain concern there. They could have other microchips or other software running inside those devices, so this should be a huge concern.
Is that true of American companies whose hardware is manufactured in China?
Potentially, that could be part of the supply chain concern if it comes back with something different than what was spec'd. Yes.
Mr. President, let me just ask you on that point, and I've seen your report here, Which Ties Will Bind, which is extremely alarming in many respects, and I want to make sure I get some of these figures right. You say, based on your research, 80% of Apple's suppliers are based in China.
So that's almost exactly right. 80% of Apple's...
The scariest part? This hack wasn't just about stealing. It was about staying. These attackers set up backdoors to ensure long-term access, turning our own systems into tools for espionage. Imagine the damage if this access is used during a crisis like a conflict over Taiwan. The bottom line is simple. This attack proves the CCP's cyber strategy is advancing rapidly, and we're not doing enough to counter it. Here's where things get even messier. Many American corporations are indirectly enabling this by being overly dependent on China. Let me hit you with some numbers. 80% of Apple's suppliers have facilities in China. 95% of Apple's consumer products are manufactured there. A third of Amazon's suppliers operate in China. These numbers are staggering. And while companies argue that decoupling isn't feasible, the truth is they've prioritized profits over national security for too long. Now let's talk Taiwan, a potential flashpoint that could change everything. Taiwan is home to over 60% of the world's semiconductor manufacturing, including the cutting-edge chips we use in our smartphones, cars, and even military tech. If China were to invade Taiwan, as some experts predict, the global tech industry could collapse overnight. Companies reliant on Chinese supply chains would be left scrambling. This isn't just hypothetical. Recent reports suggest the CCP is preparing for scenarios that could disrupt global supply chains. The Salt Typhoon hack may be a preview of how they plan to exploit these vulnerabilities. The Salt Typhoon hack is a wake-up call. It's not just about cyber attacks, it's about the larger picture of how we've allowed economic convenience to overshadow national security. We're at a crossroads. Do we continue down a path of dependency, or do we take the hard but necessary steps to secure our future? Thanks for sticking with me through this critical discussion. Give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future updates.